hear me? Can y'all hear me? I'll make enough noise that you can hear me. Anyhow, look that thing over, and kind of, I try to get you to leave here and take some action. I want you to go out and start calling your state reps. I want you to go out and call your federal reps and call your federal senators and tell them enough of this crap already, that we got to do something different, that what we're doing is not hacking it. Anyhow, take that with you, look that over.
I'll see if this thing works. We'll try it anyway. That's good. Yeah. Most of you I know, and a lot of you I bet. I hope I haven't missed anybody. But my name is Keith Greene, and I'm going to be a candidate for mayor this fall. And really, right now, we don't have anything going on, no primary involved. So we won't be making a whole lot of racket until late July or August. But we are here tonight in support of Justin and Mr. Moll, which I think will represent us well. And we're looking forward to seeing some new faces, especially in Washington, D.C. and the state legislature. So, Bob, who's there up there?
Steve, I'm going to ask you a question right here. Y'all don't have a primary already just show up on the ballot in November?
No, it's what they call a non-partisan election. So there will be no primary. We'll just be running on at the general election.
They just have the general election.
Yes.
Do you have, if you don't go and get 50%, do you have to rise to it?
Then there's a runoff between the two highest votes. So we're going to try to knock it out the first time.
Save time and effort and money.
That's right.
All right. Anyhow, Keith Greene running for mayor.
My name is Joe Maynard, and my partner Brenda Taylor back there have formed organizations, several organizations, after we got sick and tired of what the government was doing, and sick and tired of the people that were trying to get the government to stop doing what they were doing. I didn't really see a path forward that would be acceptable to a small business owner. We've got Conduit for Commerce, which is an organization that gets small business people together that aren't looking for something in return, that just want their liberty, want their freedom. And we do a policy positions on a variety of issues. Now, it's important to first note that we have determined that the federal government cannot be changed from within. We don't believe the vote will change the federal government. We believe that it has to be done by states, in a convention of states or nullification, something along those lines. We just do not believe that the incentives are set up properly to change the federal government through the vote. If you leave local issues to local people, that's the best of all worlds. So the fundamental sovereign unit that I think most of us would agree with in the state or in the country is the states. And we're working hard to try to bring more freedom, more liberty to the state government. It's been run by Democrats for 138 years. It's going to take a lot of work to move people from that acceptance of, Democrats are conservative also, and they are, but they need to just change parties and go ahead and get there. But we're really not a party organization. We're a pro-business, pro-jobs, pro-opportunity, pro-freedom organization. And we also have Conduit for Action, which is a lobbying organization. We promote certain issues that we feel are most important at the time. The one at this time is the private option. There's nothing good about the private option. We've got a lot of information on our website. You see our Conduit for Commerce website. It's linked to our Conduit for Action website, which gives you everything you wanted to know and 10 times more background on the private option. We also have an organization called Commerce in Action, which is intended to group companies, small companies that don't want anything in return. We're not talking about Walmart, we're not talking about J.B. Hunt, we're not talking about Sparks Hospital. We're talking about this restaurant over here and the car lot up the street that recognize that government is an obstacle in their they're living off of our productivity, causing us to not be able to do everything we could do to create the jobs. There are 50,000 small businesses in Arkansas that employ almost 1 million people. There's another million that just live off the government, and there's the third million works for the government. That's your 3 million people in Arkansas. There's 20, 30, 40,000 that work for big businesses, not many. So small business is sitting on the sidelines, and I hope that everybody here will think about supporting what Bob's doing and other groups like this to get these small business people off the sidelines. They need to be in this room tonight. They don't know they do, but everybody here needs to tell them, get off your butts and do something. Because there are people out there that are doing some things and they need a little bit of support, whether it's time or financial support. Because the government, we believe that the government is going to take it. I mean, you're not going to keep your money. Now, you're only going to choose how it's going to go. Is it going to go fighting the government, or is it going to go willingly to the government? So that's kind of a synopsis of all the things that we're doing. We're on our way to Little Rock tonight. Tomorrow they'll probably take another vote on the private option, or they'll try to if they think they've got the votes. We're there to support the reps. There's 27 of them that are still hanging tough. There's 4 or 5 of them that are marginal. We lose 2. We got Medicaid expansion. So I urge you to target your calls to these legislators to the right ones. The ones that are a little bit unsure of which way they should go, but are no's right now. We can talk to you about who those particular people are. They're all good people. They're confused. You know, if you've got a person in small business that takes time away from his business to run for office, that's the kind of people you want. What we found is what you don't want is people that look to that as their job, as their future. Because once you decide that being in the Senate is my future, so that my next job, I have to vote so that I can obtain the next job. It's a very, I mean, everybody here knows what's going on. What you suspect is true. But it's only allowed to prosper through inaction on our parts. I wasn't involved in any of this stuff 2 years ago. I built 3 businesses in Fayetteville. Started out in Fort Smith. Head down, wife, grandchildren now, and looked around. I said, nobody's doing this effectively, or there's not enough people doing it effectively, and I've dedicated my life for the next decade to try to see, as best I can, bring small business together and reduce the size of government. Not run the government smarter. You know, here's Mr. Conservative. I know how to go up there and get elected, and I'll be using the government resources in a smarter way. There is no smart way to use government. Well, government is force. That's the only thing it is. And for every measure of force and control and power that you give government, that is that much less that we have. So that's what we're going to do. I urge you to look at our website, see what we're about. You know small businesses that need to get involved, but you don't know quite how to approach them. Call me. I'll meet with them, meet with a group of them. Website's on the card. It's conduitforcommerce.org. Conduit, it's like the conduit for commerce.org.
Why don't you go ahead and give these few names, and then I'll go ahead and call these guys.
Well, Brenda is the conspirator in crime on this for Liberty. She's a tax attorney, and we met, and she has a lot of background on a lot of these folks, and she can remember names a heck of a lot better than I can. The people that we need to focus on, if you're calling, these are decent people that have a decent viewpoint on both sides, but they need to be supported, because there's plenty of people down there that say, hey, we need you to pass this private option and we'll help you. There's plenty of those people because they're going to get something in return. Well, voting for smaller government gets you very little in return as a politician. The only return they can hope to have is your support. So Les Carnine from our neck of the woods, Ann Clemmer, John Hutchison, Mary Lou Slinkard, Alan Kerr, and Bill Gossage. Now we've talked to all of these folks. They are no's. They need to stay no's.
They need your help.
Yeah, I wrote them all an email last night that essentially said, that, now is the time, and putting it off is going to create something that we can never stop. So now is the time, and the people don't want this. And you may not have the support of the hospital associations and David Carter and the governor. You might not be popular with those folks, but you'll be really popular with the people, and the people are the ones that vote. The other legislators, they don't vote in your district.
And just to give you a little more background about these few people, except for Bill Gossage, they all voted ultimately yes in April 2013. They voted for the private option. And now they've changed their vote to vote not to defund it. So they're getting a lot of pressure. So they need to hear from you. And Bill is just up the road. That's why we say call him. So I'm going to leave this list for you guys. And they need your support.
Hey, Bob, thanks for the time, sir.
Thank you.
We're going to hang right there.
Bill Gossage sent me a message, I don't know if it was this morning or last night. He said, I'm a solid voter. So that was what he told me last night.
Very nice.
I hope so. All right, anybody got a question? And let me throw a commercial in for him. I think what he has talked about trying to get done is to, over a period of time of 5, 6, 7, 10 years, my story has always been we did not get in the shape we're in now overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. Joe is wanting to take 2 or 3 of the Arkansas state senators each year, every 2 years, and try to get, if they are on the wrong side, get an opponent for them and help them run for that office. And if over a period of a few years, maybe we can get some good conservative folks that in Louisville. I want to ask this question of you and Nancy. How many Democrats voted against this bill? 0. I kind of knew that, in other words.
So what we're fighting here is all the Democrats and half the Republicans.
Yeah.
Now, that combination has got to mean that it's not very good.
Yes. But anyhow, there's not been a Democrat vote against Obamacare since it was introduced 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
That's right.
Every Democrat in the world has voted for it. And I tell my state reps is that anytime all the Democrats vote for something, you need to keep both hands in your pocket, and you need to be very, very leery of what they're saying. Anyhow, any questions for Joe right quick?
Any private option questions? I've got that kind of memory in my
RAM. All right, thank you, Joe.
Okay.
This is Justin Boyd. He's an Alma fellow, but he lives in Fort Smith. I guess you work in Alma.
Yes, I'm married to an audiologist, Lori Boyd. She works.
Get over closer to that so they can hear you a little
She
better.
works at a Center for Hearing, and so basically the reality was one day that I figured out that one of us was going to commute as long as I'm in business in Alma, and it turns out that person was going to be me. So, anyhow, I'm not going to take a lot of time. There's really no point in it. For those of you who don't know, my name is Justin Boyd. I am a Republican. I was running for District 77 State Representative. That is currently held by Stephanie Moll. She's reached her term limit. She can't run anymore. And so today was the end of filing at noon today. And unless there's some kind of I didn't dot or T, I didn't cross somewhere, then I'm representative-elect for District 77. So I think that we need to just give Tommy the opportunity. Frank, others in the room, if you want to meet with me, I'd love to hear what your knowledge. I'm learning. I wish I could tell you I knew everything, but I think that's the worst thing. I'm trying to be open-minded, but I need to hear from all of you. So just let me know what we're busy about.
I'm a pretty simple fella, and I tell people like Dustin, as long as they know right from wrong, really that's about all they need to know when they go to Little Rock or Washington.
Can I make one other comment?
Yeah.
First Tea Party, there were questions about Constitution. I have my Constitution in the pocket right here. I have read it.
Just in case you didn't, I had to bring you. I won't
to hit on 2 or 3 issues. Joe hit on one, notification. We had a chance to nullify that Obama plan in Arkansas, but we have a governor and biggest majority Democrats that's running the legislature. David Carter, I was in the legislature with David Carter. Now, he only got in the race a week before the Speaker of the House. And at that time, Terry Rice, there was no opposition to Terry Rice being the Speaker. And I had talked to Terry 3 or 4 times during this, before the election, and he was opposed to Obamacare. Terry Rice was opposed to Obamacare. And we felt like that the governor was going to pull something, but anyway, he put David Carter in there. Every Democrat voted for David Carter and 6 Republicans. It's like Bob said, when all the Democrats vote for something, you need to be watching. Now, that notification was an option for Arkansas. Arkansas has $382 million in GIF funds. GIF funds is what you get to take back home to buy votes with. And the last, Jane English, that cost Arkansas $40 million of our GIF funds to get her to change her vote from a no to yes. Jane English. Now, they mentioned 4 representatives, and 2 of them will flop. When we get the money right, they will change their vote. Joe, you can bet on it. But that's the way it's run in Arkansas. Now, the state of Arkansas has a problem with our corporate and state income tax versus any state around us. We're from 3 to 5% above any state around us. Mississippi, Oklahoma, Missouri. So that's a problem we have in the state of Arkansas getting jobs. Now, what state and what city has the highest public pension rates that we're having to pay for as citizens? What state?
That's in the nation.
In the United States. What state has the highest share of revenue going to public pensions? Arkansas. And Little Rock is the highest place. Fort Smith is, I think we're tied for 10th. We're putting that much money into the public pensions plan. Now, does any of y'all have any plans like that? Or are y'all having to work for your pension plan? Anyway, I heard one of our representatives say, when they presented this Obama health care bill, he said, it's like voting for warm poop or cold poop. Now, which one did you want to vote for? And I said, there's a word named nullification that y'all could have went through with the House and took care of. But as far as the Republicans taking over the House and the Senate, that's a bunch of bull. We have some rhinos or half-beat Democrats that's still in charge of Little Rock. And until, it'll take us 10 years, even with changing governors, which I figured that Asa will win that, but it'll take 10 years to get that Little Rock cleaned out because the bureaucracy really runs that. And until the money gets right, they'll waller about the vote on this option. But I'm betting that the House will vote for the option because they'll get the money right. They got $382 million in GIF funds to buy those votes. Now the Senate and the House get some, take back home, and we put $1 million in museum and all this other bull. But it's just a time until they get the price right. That's all I got to say. Question? Anything on Obamacare?
Wait a minute, now you and Joe both can't be experts on it at the same time.
Well, in 2016, when Obama quits, or the federal government quits putting money into this Obama plan, it'll cost us about $425 million for our 10%. Now, in 2009, we borrowed $140 million from the feds just to pay our 10% of Medicaid in the state of Arkansas. Arkansas is a balanced budget amendment. That's a bunch of bull too. We owed them $140 million for our Medicaid, and we owed them $160 for unemployment insurance. Now, why did the feds give us this money? Because they had raised from 26 weeks to, I think it went over 100 weeks of unemployment in the state of Arkansas. So they had to bump us up, and they said they'll forgive that. Well, how long are they going to forgive it when they're 17 trillion in the hole, and we're going to be 425 million at a minimum in 2016 to pay for our Medicaid? Now, Obama will be gone, Beebe will be gone, and a bunch of them in Washington will be gone, and a bunch of our senators will be gone. And who's going to pick up this tab? They're all gone and retired. It's a good thing.
And we're paying them a lot to retire, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Frankie.
President of the Republican Women of Crawford County. Any ladies are in here would like to join, see the actor.
I can vouch for her that that title don't put her sitting behind a desk. She and I stood out on Rogers Avenue one day with our signs on Obamacare when it must have been 100 and some degrees. But she's a worker. You left this up here.
Well, y'all are looking at your national representative for the 4th Congressional District, I believe. Is it 4th? Yeah. Because Steve is our semi-conservative. Steve Womack is in the 3rd. So, but anyway, Tommy Moll is from Fort Smith. Well, that's where he started out. He graduated from Southside. He's got a law degree. That kind of makes it a little bit suspect, but anyway, he has a good word for this Obama health care in the state of Arkansas. He didn't say it, but anyway, you'll like what he's got to say. I think he will stick with it. I know his granddad, Ben Shipley. Some of y'all may know of Shipley Baking, but anyway, Ben Shipley said he was conservative. He's a lot worse than Ben, and if y'all know Ben is conservative. He's not just a Republican, he's conservative. But anyway, he comes from a pretty good family, and I believe he will be the next one. There was one thing I got to say. Some of Obama's advisors came in and said that there was 2 Brazilians killed in Iraq. And Obama just fainted, anyway, Obama finally woke him up and said, he asked him, well, how many is a bazillion? I know what these trillions are, but I don't know what a bazillion. How many did we kill? Tommy, go ahead.
Thank you, Frankie, for that introduction, and thank all of y'all for your time and attention this evening. But before I go into anything about myself or the campaign we're running, I just want to put an exclamation point on what Joe and Frankie were talking about with this private option deal. You know, you could look at it one way, and Frankie was laying it out, that it's going to cost the Arkansas taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars. I would say it's about more than just the dollars and cents here. This is a test of our principles. We have an opportunity in Arkansas to do something that states rarely have an opportunity to do in this day and age. We talk all the time about states' rights and how the federal government tries to force states to take certain actions. In this case, the Supreme Court of the United States, when Obama, under Obamacare, tried to force states to do this, the Supreme Court came in and said, no, you cannot force states to do that. States have to decide to do it. So we could not have this presented to us on a nicer platter. The Supreme Court says, you, Arkansas, you 50 states, get to decide, do you want to implement Obamacare in your state or not?
And Tommy, if you would, explain a little bit more. That lawsuit was to force them by way of cutting off their Medicaid money if they did not. That was what that part of the deal.
That's right.
Okay, but you might tell them that because they might not know.
Obamacare tried to threaten states by cutting all of their Medicaid funding for their existing Medicaid programs if they didn't expand Medicaid like Obama wanted states to do. And so that's what the Supreme Court said, no, that is coercion. It's unconstitutional to do that. States have to decide to do that. So you hear folks complain all the time about we need to assert our states' rights. This is what that looks like. This is where if the 50 states just band together and say, you know what? No thank you, Obama. No thank you, big government. If the states say no, Obamacare fails. That law will fail. And so this vote in Arkansas is, yes, it's about dollars and cents and whether we're going to be taxed to death going forward as if we're not taxed enough already. It's also about one of the most important constitutional principles that we should all stand up for. So I would encourage you, just like the others here tonight, call those representatives who were waffling on this deal. This is a test. And we have an opportunity to lead, to be one of the states that leads, asserting our rights against the federal government with a very simple answer. No thank you, Mr. President. It's that simple. So now that I've already hit my soapbox right out of the gate here, I should back up a little bit and tell you about who I am and what I'm running for. Like Frankie said, I'm Tommy Moll. I am running for U.S. Congress. This is the seat that Tom Cotton is vacating since he'll be our next United States Senator. This is what the district looks like. There was a reference earlier to how there's a little bit of maybe gerrymandering going on here. So this is 33 counties that are in the 4th district now. Some of those counties are just partially in the district. So like here in Crawford County, for example, if you live in Alma, I need your vote. If you live west of Alma, I need you to call your friends and relatives who live east of you and ask them to vote for me, but you can't vote in this election. So it's an interesting shape. You ought to come look after we wrap up tonight. But I am running in the 4th district. I want to be the next Republican congressman to be the next constitutional conservative representing Arkansas in Washington. My wife Meredith and I both grew up in Fort Smith. We're both 6th-generation Arkansans. We live in Hot Springs. And before I tell you anything more about my background or this race, I just want to answer the one question that I know everyone in this room who I have not met before tonight is asking. And you're thinking, well, I got an email or a phone call from Bob Newbold about a guy who's running for Congress about a River Valley Tea Party meeting. By the way, our campaign has been endorsed by Freedom Works, so we are delighted to be here with the Tea Party here in the River Valley. And, you know, y'all stand for the constitutional conservative principles that I want to stand for. Anyway, I digress a minute. You got an email from Bob, and now you're looking at me, scratching your head, thinking, United States Congress? Is this guy old enough to run for United States Congress? So the answer is yes. And in fact, my age is directly related to the reason I'm running. I am running to defend our freedoms from a federal government that is out of control. Our country is on the wrong track under President Obama. We don't have that long to get back on the right track. The stakes for our country have never been as high as they are now. And I'm running because our freedoms are threatened every day by our federal government. Now, you think about one example of that, and it's Obamacare. You've already heard me talk about that a little bit tonight. Obamacare is nothing more than nationalizing 1/6 of our economy, the healthcare sector. And there are really only two things that they do with Obamacare. They have all these mandates and regulations where they tell you and your doctor and your hospital what to do. And then they create a new entitlement program for about 10% of the population. But before we go any further into the details of Obamacare, what we need to replace it with, how we can repeal it, let me take a step back and talk about something on a little lighter, but in my opinion, equally serious note because of the principle that's at stake. So I brought some props this evening. Light bulbs. So this goes back to 2007. Remember George W. Bush? Sometimes he was conservative, sometimes he wasn't conservative. In this case, he was not acting very conservative because he put his name on a law called the Energy Independence and Security Act. This is 2007. Now, first off, when you hear the name of a law from Washington and it sounds really good, that's sort of like we were hearing earlier. If a bunch of Democrats are voting for something, examine it more carefully. If there's a name of a law that sounds great, it might just end up being the opposite of what it sounds like. So like the Affordable Care Act is actually the Unaffordable Care Act. This Energy Independence Act was 1,000 pages long, but there was part of it that regulated these. And do y'all know what they did? They said, you know what? These won't fly anymore. These old light bulbs, they're not good enough. Instead, we, the members of Congress, and the President want everyone in the country to use these. Does anyone have any idea why Congress and the President might have wanted to force the American people to use these? Big business.
We need more mercury in our lives.
No. You're stealing my thunder there. We'll get there. You're right. We'll get there. So, but it was big business and the environmentalists teamed up, and GE said, you know what? If we make these and we can charge more for them, we'll line our own pockets with this deal. And the environmentalists, for their part, said, oh, these old light bulbs, they consume too much electricity, and to produce electricity, we have to burn hydrocarbons, and burning hydrocarbons puts gas into the atmosphere, and because of global warming, we need to use more energy-efficient light bulbs. That was their way of thinking, which is totally nonsense, but that's what they thought. So we got stuck with these, okay? So big business and the environmentalists come in. Now we're stuck with these. Anyone want to opine on what they think of these newfangled light bulbs here?
They don't last very long. They're a hazmat waiting to happen if you break one, and they're all made in China. Is that enough?
That's almost exactly right.
They got a loophole now for the heavy-duty light bulbs that are greater than the wattage that they ban for just regular-duty light bulbs that you can buy now. And they're not the compact fluorescents.
Leave it to Congress to come up with something
convoluted. And they will fade
convoluted.
your textiles in your home because of the UV that they emit.
The long and short of it is that this is an awful product that would never survive in the free market if Congress hadn't injected itself into our lives. And on top of that, as Joe mentioned, there's a little hazmat issue. Because you know what happens when one of these things busts in your home? You got a mercury problem. Because fluorescent light bulbs have mercury vapor that's released when they bust in your home. So I went onto the EPA's website, figuring out, all right, what do we do when this happens in the home? Because you know, the government, what's the government do when they come up with a bad idea and they need to sell the American people on it and tell them what to do? Kind of like we heard this with Obamacare lately. Create a website, right? So there's a government propaganda website trying to convince people that these are a good idea. You can go on there, you put in your zip code, you put in what color your walls are, you put in what size of lamp you got, and they will send you back a list of big government approved vendors for the government suggested light bulb for your living room. It's awful. But on top of that, there's a special link on there. Here's what you do when one of these bulbs breaks, because you got a mercury problem. So I read the whole list of what they tell you to do. It's a 4-page, single-space manual. And let me just boil it down to a few steps for you. Number 1, evacuate your room. People and pets. Number 2, open all the windows. Turn off your air conditioner or your heater, because you know what? If you've got air flowing through there, you're just going to stir that mercury up even worse than if you just let it flow out naturally. Number 3, don't sweep it up. Don't vacuum it up, because you know what happens? You bring a vacuum in there, you've got shards of glass with mercury residue on there. Guess what? You just made the problem worse. So what they ask you to do is go find you some duct tape. Find you some duct tape, get out on your hands and knees, and inch by inch by inch by inch, pick up those shards of glass. Take them to the trash can. Take that trash bag outside immediately, because mercury vapor can escape through your trash bag. And then, by the way, if your pets feel sick, call a vet. If you got kids, or if you feel ill, call the doctor, call poison control. And oh, by the way, any questions, email the EPA. That's what they tell you to do. Now we can, we're sitting here thinking, well gosh, that's a really annoying law. It's a great example of big government in our lives and how it makes our lives worse. And this, I can't stand this, but it's not the greatest threat to our liberty as Americans. What it is though, is Obamacare. And the principles at stake with Obamacare are the exact same as with light bulbs. It's the government coming in, telling us what to do. And think about it. The government took something like this that's been lighting our homes for a century and is now making us use this, and we know why it's a bad idea. What happens when the government comes into the doctor's office and tells you and your doctor and your insurance company and your hospital, do this, don't do that. Use this medicine, not that medicine. Or you need to have surgery, use this tool, not that tool. Think about it. If the government can do this with light bulbs, they can absolutely wreck the healthcare sector. And it's not only that that's so bad about Obamacare. We know that it will lead to poor quality of healthcare. It's also this new entitlement program. The private option in Arkansas is part of that. But we created a new entitlement program for about 10% of the population, or more than 30 million Americans, who are going to get thrown on to government health care. And how do we pay for that? How does the government pay for anything? They tax people more. They take more from people who are working and saving, and they give it to other people.
Isn't that called a shared responsibility payment next year?
Call it what you want, but it is taking from one group of people and giving to another for this new entitlement program that they created. And what happens when you tax people? It harms the economy. There's no doubt that Obamacare, set aside all the bad things it will do for our health care, it makes the economy worse. The Congressional Budget Office came out a few weeks ago and said the impact to jobs of Obamacare will be about 2.5 million people will lose their jobs. And the White House, President Obama's folks in the White House came out and said, yeah, you bet they will. They're going to choose not to work. Excuse me? And they're saying that's a good thing, that they're forcing people out of the labor force, and they're taxing people, and that's going to put a big wet blanket on job creation as well. That's not the way we should be running this country. And if you look at the 4th district that I want to represent, the economy there is struggling already. Unemployment in this district is way higher than it is in the rest of the state and the country. And you look at some of the other things that big government is doing to us, let's just think through, how is big government making our lives worse? Let's talk about the Farm Bill. Y'all heard a lot about the Farm Bill, right? And the common wisdom is, Arkansas, it's a farm state. Got to vote for that Farm Bill. That's what the common wisdom would suggest. Here's what the Farm Bill has to say about the 4th district. Does anyone in this room raise cattle or chicken, or have a friend or family member who's in one of those fields? There's got to be. All over this district. Here's what the Farm Bill has to say to you or your friends or family. You're going to pay more for feed for your chickens or cattle. You know why? It's big government once again. Because they have the old ethanol mandate. You all know about that one, right? Where big government comes in and says, you know what? Every gallon of gas you're going to put in your car, we're going to force you to have some ethanol in there. And guess what? Ethanol comes from corn. That means when all this corn is being used for ethanol instead of on the farm, guess what? The price of corn shoots through the roof. So what the Farm Bill means for you is your business is threatened, or if you're still in business, the government is reaching in and taking from your bottom line. That's what big government means for you. Now, you've heard me talk a little bit about healthcare, about economics. My background is really in business and economics, and that's what I think about, and the approach that I would want to take to Washington, D.C. I studied economics at William & Mary for college, at the London School of Economics for grad school. As Bob said, I did take a law degree at what I like to say is the only law school in the country more liberal than Tom Cotton's law school. I was at Columbia, studied law and business, and have worked in a lot of the same fields. I was at the Peterson Institute working in Washington, D.C. What we did there directly relates to what goes on here. We would advise the federal government, this is back in the day when we had a Republican administration in the White House, we would advise the federal government on how to expand opportunities to export U.S. farm products and manufactured products all around the world. I also worked at a bank by the name of Jefferies, and what I did there was I helped invest money in the energy business. So imagine the other things that our president demonizes, whether that be coal, oil, natural gas. That's what we did, was invest in all those kinds of businesses. That's what I do on my own account today in business for myself. So the energy business, you look again at this map, whether you're in Madison County in the northern part of the state, or you're in Lafayette County in South Arkansas, or anywhere in between in Sebastian or Crawford, there are opportunities to drill or dig for coal or oil or gas all over this district, if the federal government stays out of our way. Because this tax reform idea that our president has, where he talks about, oh, we need to end the tax loopholes for big oil. You hear that talking point a lot, right? Okay, what he doesn't tell you is that really it doesn't affect the big oil companies, it affects the little guy. And what he's really trying to do is raise taxes on independent drillers. That is to say, hundreds of people that live in South Arkansas and make their living doing this, he wants to raise their taxes in a way that will put them out of business overnight. So you go into Magnolia, Arkansas, that's Columbia County. We've been there many times. Not everyone's in the oil business down there. Not even a big, majority. But go and ask the lawyers who their clients are. Go ask the accountants who their clients are. Go ask the doctors who their clients are. Go to the fancy jewelry shop on the town square. Say, hey, who buys those fancy watches you sell? A lot of that all relates to the energy business. So I want to get off my soapbox and let y'all participate a little bit. But I would just wrap up by saying that I am truly honored you would take time to come out on a freezing cold night, maybe even over icy roads, to come out this evening and give me a few minutes of your time to tell you about who I am and what I'm doing. Our country is absolutely headed in the wrong direction. We can't allow that to go on any longer. We cannot give up hope. There is a better future, because if you just boil down the core of the direction we're going now, that is the core of what Obama thinks he has to offer, is this. He says, you live today at the direction of the government and at the expense of the next generation. And he doesn't literally say that. But if you think about all the policies, all the new entitlement programs, Obamacare, he says, we will give something to you today if you live how we tell you to live. That is, we're going to give you free health care, but it's going to be government health care. That's what he says. But it all costs money, and a lot of that money's borrowed. Who pays that back? You know, normally we think of debt as an IOU. You give me money and I give you a piece of paper that says I owe you. That's not what's going on. It's not an IOU. It's not even a we in this room owe you for the money our country's borrowing. It's a they owe you. And you know who they are? They're not here tonight because they're doing their homework, because they're in grade school and not even old enough to vote, or they haven't been born. That's the path we're on now. But we know what the better path looks like. The better path looks like what got us to where we are today, which is that each generation of Americans sacrifices so that the next generation has a country that is more prosperous and more free. That's what made this country great. Those are the ideas that our founders had in mind when they sacrificed so that we could be free. And every generation after that. And keeping this district in the hands of a constitutional conservative who will go to Washington and fight for the ideals that we hold true, that will get us back on the right path. And so, like I said, I am Tommy Moll. I'm running for Congress. If you live in Alma, or if you live east of Alma, I need your vote on May 20th. I need your help getting other people to vote. We'll need to make phone calls and knock on doors. If you live west of Alma, I still need you to make phone calls and knock on doors and call all your friends east of Alma and tell them to get out and vote for Tommy Moll on May 20th. So I will stop there. Thank you, and I would love to answer some questions.
I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you talk a lot about Obamacare and how it is totally detrimental, okay, and for the 4th District to keep it constitutional. A couple of votes back, Tom Cotton voted to fund Obamacare. Will you do say that even if it is in a continuing resolution, what would be your vote if they put the funding for Obamacare in it? Will you vote yes to continue the resolution to fund the government along with Obamacare, or will you stay with your principles?
I will not vote to fund the law that is the greatest threat to our liberty and prosperity as Americans.
Even if it's wrapped up in something else?
That's right. And the reason that so many members of Congress did vote for that continuing resolution that you were talking about is similar to the reason that so many folks in Little Rock have been snookered to vote for the private option. Because they take something that's awful, that is Obamacare, and they connect it into a bigger spending bill, and they say, well, we understand that you're against this one really awful thing, but look at all that, you don't want to be the one holding up everything else, do you? But the point is, if you have enough constitutional conservatives in the first place, then this awful thing will be voted up or down on its own. Because if the leadership knows that they don't have the votes to get the big budget passed where they try to cram all the bad stuff in it, then they won't try to do it because they know it'll fail. But the problem in Washington is now leadership, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and sometimes on the Republican side, they think they can strong-arm enough people to just voting for everything all at once, and so that's what they've done.
Questions? Tommy, I'll ask you a question. How about, just like this light bulb deal, how much do you reckon that cost America in jobs and money to go from the regular light bulb to these things? I'm talking about jobs. Didn't a lot of these made overseas, these new bulbs?
Almost all of them.
That's what I thought. And the old bulbs that used to be made in America, they shut those plants down. Okay?
That was a General Electric plant that shut down a light bulb factory when they started doing those, ironically.
If you could read the fine print here, made in China.
Yeah.
Bob, I'll shoot straight with you. I don't know the number of people who have been put out of work because these are now made in China. But everyone in this room has to buy light bulbs, and you've got to pay several times more for this awful thing than you did for this. So, you know, it's another one of those things. What will bankrupt our country or bankrupt the taxpayers is Obamacare. You know, having to buy light bulbs that cost 3 times what they should, you know, folks will just swallow it and move on and complain. But, you know, you add up enough of those little chunks, and it ends up being, you know, one step for big government, another little step, another little step, another little step. And before you know it, boom. Then, you know, the average working person is paying the taxes they know about, but then they're paying the hidden taxes. This is nothing but a hidden tax on consumers, because the government's forcing you to pay more for something that you may not want to buy.
Get this fellow some hard questions. He's going to get up there and he's going to represent, he's one of, what, 435 people? And they're going to run this country. And you folks need to be telling them right now what you want him to do when he gets there.
I have a question.
There's a question.
And it ties in with your hammer and nail story, okay? Because I want everybody to remember it, but it's a question for Tommy. Do you know Kim Hammer, Representative Kim Hammer?
Not personally, I mean, I know who she is.
Him.
Him.
That's okay. He is, I just got a text, you know, this is fresh off from another representative, and they are afraid that he's going to change his vote to a yes in the morning. So I thought maybe you would call him, in addition to everyone in this room.
I'll call him.
Call Mr. Hammer, Representative Hammer, tonight and in the morning, because, you know, we don't need him to change. All right, thank you.
And if you've got
Give
the
us a
phone
phone number
number,
by chance.
Joe, do you have Kim Hammer's phone number?
I'm sure I do.
Okay, they need Kim Hammer's phone number so they can give him a call and say, how can we support you to vote, continue to vote no? Because he was an original no vote,
yeah.
and he stayed no, and he's looking at voting yes, okay?
Representative Didiotis, Fort Smith Valley, he's terminated. He told somebody here a while back that he voted for the private option. He voted with the special interest folks versus us taxpayers. Folks, we don't need that kind of representation. I'm just telling you, they're going to eat your lunch if you don't pay attention. And I think they're eating our lunch on this health care. Anybody else got a thought, question? Yes, sir, Tom.
When we talk about budget cuts, what the lawmakers like to say is they'll talk about we're cutting so much percent, but what it really means is we're taking some off. We're cutting back the expansion and not really drawing everything back where it needs to be. And when you talk about big government overreach, it's kind of, I think about it the same way. Of course, we need to slow down the runaway train. We got to get it pulled back a little bit, but then we need it to go backwards. So what I'm curious about is what are you going to do to make it go backwards? Because ultimately what it means is for our lawmakers to really draw back their own power, limit their own power. And I don't, you know, I want you to be properly compensated, but I don't believe all, you know, this bullcrap about all these perks that our lawmakers get for the rest of their lives is just wrong. We need term limits. We need to cut. What are you going to do to draw all that back? Is what I'm curious about.
Well, I like the first point you made, which is to really show that what members of Congress often call a cut is totally bogus. There's a couple tricks they play. One is they cut the rate of growth. Or they have a budget that's in a 10-year window and they say over the course of the 10 years we're going to cut, but then the cuts take place in years 7, 8, 9, and 10, and oh, by the way, everyone's forgotten by the time you get there, and then they just spend more. So the way I define a cut is how many dollars did you spend this year, and how many dollars are you spending next year? And if that number is smaller than that number, you did not cut spending. So how do we get from where we are now to where we want to be? First off, if we would undo the Obama impact, it would be so easy. It would be such a simple formula. And you look at what he did, all we're talking about now is domestic discretionary spending. So it doesn't include entitlements. He, across the board, raise spending by at least 20%. So every department, whether it be energy, agriculture, labor, whatever it is, all that since Obama has come into office has gone up 20%. And now, anytime anyone talks about, well, we spent this much on pick a department, labor this year, we want to spend just a little less than that next year. They act as if the sky's falling down, but really, if all we did was say, you know what, let's just undo the impact of President Obama. He came in with this failed stimulus package, and he locked in spending at a higher level across all the departments. Let's just, boom, undo that. The world was fine. Well, I shouldn't say that. We had a lot of problems even before President Obama came in. We had an economic crisis. But, you know, the first thing to do is just say, we're going to reset all the agency budgets to the 2008 pre-Obama level. Would be, in my view, just one quick step to take. The second thing I kind of already did on, which is Obamacare. A lot of that spending will come in future years when the cost of healthcare keeps going up. But preemptively undoing that, repealing it fully, would save us hundreds of billions of dollars. So those are two places I would start.
That's still, you're talking about spending, yeah, but we're still talking about the government overreach, the power that the federal government has over our lives. The spending, yes, I get you on the spending, but I'm talking about big government overreach.
And on that, I would...
the EPA, enforcing laws. Unelected people that are forcing laws on us, they shouldn't even be laws.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a whole other aspect of the threat to our way of life, beyond the fact that we're borrowing money at an unsustainable rate, is the way Congress works now is they write the law that's this many pages, and then they punt to bureaucrats, unelected, so EPA, for example, to write rules that are that many pages. So a good example of that is the banking law that Obama passed called Dodd-Frank. Dodd was a liberal senator from Connecticut. Frank was a liberal member of the House from Massachusetts. So they have this banking law that went from about 1,000 pages, I think, in the law to 15,000 pages of regulations written by unelected bureaucrats. So I'll give you a specific answer on that one. The formula that the president wanted to use was pass a law, punt to bureaucrats, you can't vote out the bureaucrats. That's the classic move that big government people want to make because it locks in big government. But here's how you undo it. The bureaucrats who write those rules are funded right now through the Federal Reserve, not by Congress. So, whereas with most agencies, Congress can conduct oversight over, like the EPA, for example, and they yank the funding. So even if they can't repeal a law, they can just yank the funding and say, good luck enforcing it, but we're not going to fund you. So there's that electoral accountability. With Dodd-Frank, the bureaucrats are paid by the Federal Reserve, so Congress can't touch it. So the first thing we should do is say, no. The budget that's going to cover the paychecks of the bureaucrats writing those rules, we're taking that sucker out of the Federal Reserve. That's going to be subject to annual budgeting by Congress. Because right now, they are literally untouchable. They're unelected, they write rules, and Congress doesn't even have the power to yank the funding if they do something that they shouldn't be doing.
Can nullification apply to an agency like that?
I don't know. I don't have a crystal clear answer for you on that. But, I think just the quick fix is repeal. If not repeal, just make the budget subject to Congress's annual appropriation, just like every other agency. My preference would be strongly to repeal the whole thing, just like Obamacare. But in the meantime, we've got to work with how many votes do we need to do that, and do we have the votes? And if not, then what's the next best thing? And the next best thing is to just yank the funding.
All right, let's let Todd, yeah.